Thunder pressed himself against the back wall of his stall, his once champion heart shattered by abandonment after the fall that had ended his racing career. The moment Lily spoke his name, her voice carrying the weight of her own invisible scars, his ears swiveled toward her, the first sign that perhaps they could save each other. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Thunder had once been the pride of Blackwood Stables, a magnificent thoroughbred with a gleaming chestnut coat and a spirit that seemed to embody the very essence of freedom. His powerful legs carried him across finish lines with such grace and speed that spectators would gasp in awe. Racing through the wind, his mane flowing like a banner of victory, Thunder had been unstoppable, the kind of horse that trainers dream about and owners boast of at exclusive gatherings. But that was before the accident. Now Thunder stood in the corner of his stall, head hanging low, his once brilliant coat dulled by months of neglect. The spark in his eyes had dimmed to a vacant stare that barely registered the world around him. Where once he had pranced eagerly at the sound of approaching footsteps, he now remained motionless, as if trapped in a prison of his own making. "He's useless now," said Maxwell Wellington, Thunder's owner, a man whose cold blue eyes matched the ruthless efficiency with which he ran his racing empire. Standing outside the stall, Wellington didn't even bother to look at the horse as he spoke to Richard, his head trainer. 6 months of rehabilitation, the best veterinarian's money can buy, and he still refuses to run. He flinches at the mere sight of the track. Richard shifted uncomfortably, his weathered face creased with concern. Unlike Wellington, he had spent countless hours with Thunder, had witnessed the horse's journey from a spirited colt to champion racer, and now to this shell of his former self. "The physical injuries have healed, sir," Richard said carefully. "But the trauma, that's different. He was trapped under that collapsed fence for nearly an hour. The fear is still with him." Wellington's jaw tightened. "I don't pay for excuses, Richard. I pay for results. And that horse," he pointed an accusatory finger toward Thunder, "is worth nothing if he won't race." "Perhaps with more time," Richard began, but Wellington cut him off with a dismissive wave. "Time is money, and I've wasted enough of both on him." He straightened his tailored suit jacket. "I'm selling him to Hartman's processing plant. At least I can recoup some of my losses." Richard's face paled. "Sir, you can't mean that. Thunder was your champion. He won you millions. Surely there are other options. Retirement, breeding, even selling him to a riding stable. A horse that panics at the sight of a racing track is worthless for breeding. His bloodline ends here." Wellington's voice was final, cold as the steel gates of a starting box. "Have him ready for transport by Friday." As Wellington walked away, his Italian leather shoes clicking on the concrete floor of the stable, Richard remained behind, his heart heavy in his chest. He approached Thunder's stall slowly, speaking in the gentle tones he had always used with the horse. "I'm sorry, old boy," he whispered, reaching through the bars to stroke Thunder's nose. The horse didn't react, didn't even seem to notice the touch. It was as if he had already resigned himself to his fate. That night, as darkness fell over Blackwood Stables, Richard sat in his small office, a glass of whiskey untouched before him. The thought of Thunder's impending doom weighed on him like a physical burden. After 30 years of working with horses, the idea of sending one, especially one as exceptional as Thunder, to slaughter was abhorrent. But what could he do? Wellington was not a man to change his mind once it was set. The sudden ring of his phone startled him from his dark thoughts. "Hello?" he answered, not recognizing the number. "Mr. Richards? It's Emma Taylor. We met at the Lexington show last year. I run Willow Creek Farm." Richard remembered her, a young woman who had impressed him with her knowledge of horses and gentle handling techniques. "Yes, Ms. Taylor. What can I do for you?" "I heard through the grapevine that Maxwell Wellington is looking to sell some of his horses. I'm expanding my therapeutic riding program, and I was wondering if he had any gentle-natured animals that might be suitable." Richard's heart skipped a beat. It felt like divine intervention. "Actually, there is one horse. A very special horse." By the time Friday morning arrived, Richard had made all the arrangements. Instead of the truck from Hartman's processing plant, it was Emma Taylor who pulled up to Blackwood Stables in her modest horse trailer. Richard had told Wellington that a small therapeutic riding center had offered a nominal sum for Thunder, enough to cover the paperwork and not much more. Wellington, eager to be rid of what he now considered a liability, hadn't even bothered to meet the buyer. "Thank you for this," Emma said as she shook Richard's hand. She was younger than he remembered, perhaps in her late 20s, with kind eyes and a quiet confidence that came from years of working with troubled animals. "From what you've told me, it sounds like he needs a safe place to heal." "He does," Richard agreed, leading her to Thunder's stall. "But I should warn you, he's not the same horse he once was. The accident changed him. He's withdrawn, unresponsive. I haven't seen him show interest in anything for months." Emma nodded, her expression serious but not deterred. "Trauma affects them just as it affects us. He'll need patience and understanding." When they reached the stall, Thunder was standing in his usual corner, his back to the door, seemingly oblivious to their presence. Emma didn't immediately approach. Instead, she stood quietly, observing him with a practiced eye. "Has he always been chestnut that color?" she asked softly. "No," Richard sighed. "He used to gleam like polished copper. The grooms could barely keep up with his energy. He was magnificent." Emma's eyes softened with compassion. "He still is, just broken in ways we can't see." After a few moments, she slowly opened the stall door and stepped inside. Thunder didn't react, didn't turn to acknowledge the intrusion into his space. Emma made no attempt to touch him. She simply stood to the side, giving him room, respecting his boundaries. "Hello, Thunder," she said in a voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Emma. I've come to take you to a new home." For the first time, the horse's ear twitched slightly at the sound of his name, a tiny movement that might have gone unnoticed by someone less attuned to the subtle language of horses, but Emma caught it, and a small smile touched her lips. As they prepared Thunder for transport, Richard provided Emma with all the information he had: Thunder's medical history, his dietary preferences, the details of the accident that had changed everything. He also handed her a small envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "His papers," Richard replied, "and a contribution to your program. It's not much, but it might help with his care." Emma's eyes widened. "You don't have to." "I do," Richard insisted. "This horse deserved better than what happened to him. Maybe with you, he'll find it." Loading Thunder into the trailer proved easier than expected. The horse that had once required 3 handlers to control his exuberance now followed Emma's gentle lead without resistance, not out of cooperation, but out of a listless surrender that was painful to witness. As Emma secured the trailer and prepared to leave, Richard approached Thunder one last time. "Goodbye, old friend," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "May you find peace at Willow Creek." Thunder stared back at him with empty eyes, a shadow of the magnificent athlete he had once been. But as the trailer pulled away from Blackwood Stables, Richard couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, Emma Taylor could reach the wounded spirit that lay buried beneath layers of trauma and fear. What neither of them knew was that the journey ahead would transform not only Thunder, but also the life of a young girl who had yet to enter his story, a girl whose voice would eventually pierce through the darkness that had claimed his heart. Willow Creek Farm sat nestled between rolling hills and ancient oak trees, its weathered red barn standing as a testament to simpler times. Unlike the sterile corporate atmosphere of Blackwood Stables, Emma's farm exuded warmth and tranquility. Here, the pace was unhurried, the focus on healing rather than winning. The property wasn't large, just 20 acres of green pastures and modest facilities, but to the animals who found sanctuary there, it was paradise. As Emma's trailer rumbled up the gravel driveway, a golden retriever with a graying muzzle bounded out to greet her, followed by a lanky teenage boy. "Did you get him?" Lucas, Emma's 17-year-old brother and right-hand man at the farm, called out as he jogged toward the trailer. Emma nodded, putting the vehicle in park. "I did, but Lucas," she lowered her voice as he approached. "He's in worse shape than I expected, not physically. His body is healed, but his spirit..." She trailed off, her eyes conveying what words couldn't. Lucas's eager expression sobered. At 17, he had already seen his share of abused and neglected animals come through Willow Creek's gates. "That bad?" "It's like he's given up," Emma replied. "Be gentle, okay? No sudden movements, no loud noises." Together, they carefully opened the trailer. Thunder hadn't moved from where Emma had secured him, standing motionless as if in a trance. When they lowered the ramp, he didn't resist being let out, but neither did he show any interest in his new surroundings. His hooves moved mechanically, one in front of the other, his head hanging low. "We've prepared the end stall in the quiet wing," Lucas said. "Fresh straw, water, everything ready." Emma nodded appreciatively. The quiet wing was what they called the section of the barn reserved for their most traumatized residents, the ones who needed extra peace and minimal stimulation. Over the years, they had learned that for some animals, the journey back to trust began with simple silence. As they led Thunder to his new stall, Emma noticed a small figure watching from the shadows of the barn. "Lily?" she called softly. "Is that you?" A girl of about 12 stepped forward, her slight frame almost lost in an oversized flannel shirt. Dark hair fell in messy waves around a face dominated by serious blue eyes. Lily had been living at Willow Creek for just over a month, sent by her aunt to spend the summer after a troubling incident at school, her third fight this year. The girl's parents had died in a car accident when she was 8, and the years since had been a carousel of behavioral issues, therapy sessions, and growing concern. "Is that the new horse?" Lily asked, her voice carefully neutral, though her eyes were fixed on Thunder with undisguised curiosity. "This is Thunder," Emma confirmed. "He's going to be staying with us for a while." Lily took a step closer, studying the horse with an intensity that seemed beyond her years. "What's wrong with him?" "He had an accident," Emma explained, choosing her words carefully. "He was a racehorse, but he got hurt and now he's afraid." Something flickered across Lily's face, a flash of recognition perhaps, or understanding. "Will he get better?" Emma glanced at Thunder, who stood unresponsive in Lucas's gentle grip. "I hope so, Lily. Sometimes all it takes is patience and the right person to help them remember who they are." Lily nodded solemnly, then retreated back into the shadows without another word. "How's it going with her?" Lucas asked quietly once Lily was out of earshot. Emma sighed. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. She's talking a little more, but she still keeps to herself most of the time. Her aunt called yesterday. Apparently, the school is recommending she repeat the year. She's fallen too far behind. "Poor kid," Lucas murmured. "Losing your parents at that age. She reminds me of him." Emma nodded toward Thunder, both of them carrying wounds no one can see. They settled Thunder into his stall, making sure he had fresh water and hay, though he showed no interest in either. Emma spent some time just sitting nearby, not approaching him, not demanding anything, simply being present. It was a technique she had developed over years of working with traumatized animals, letting them know they weren't alone, but not forcing interaction. As dusk fell, Emma reluctantly left Thunder to attend to her other responsibilities. She had 16 other horses in her care, most of them rescues, some part of her therapeutic riding program. Each had their own needs, their own schedules, and despite her concern for her newest arrival, she couldn't neglect the others. "I'll come back to check on him before bed," she promised Lucas as they walked together toward the main house. "I can do it," her brother offered. "You've had a long day." Emma smiled gratefully. "Thanks, but I'd like to see him settled for the night. First nights are always the hardest." After dinner, Emma returned to the barn with a small flashlight, careful not to disturb the other horses. The night was peaceful, filled with the gentle sounds of crickets and the occasional soft nickering of horses settling down to sleep. But as she approached Thunder's stall, she noticed something unusual. A small figure sat cross-legged on the ground outside Thunder's stall. Lily, still dressed in the same oversized flannel, was reading aloud from a book, her voice soft but clear in the quiet barn. "The horse knew the boy was scared," Lily read, "but he also knew that sometimes the bravest thing isn't having no fear, it's being afraid and still doing what needs to be done." Emma stopped, not wanting to interrupt. She watched as Lily turned a page, continuing to read without looking up to see if Thunder was listening. The horse remained in his corner, seemingly indifferent, but his ears had swiveled slightly toward the sound of Lily's voice, the first sign of engagement he had shown since his arrival. Emma retreated silently, deciding that whatever connection might be forming between the wounded girl and the wounded horse deserved the chance to develop undisturbed. Some healing, she knew, couldn't be forced or supervised. It had to happen in its own time, in its own way. Back in the farmhouse, Emma found Lucas at the kitchen table, working on the farm's accounts, a task he had taken over last year when Emma's therapeutic riding program had begun to expand. "Is Thunder okay?" he asked, looking up from his laptop. "Yes," Emma said, a small, hopeful smile playing at her lips. "And I think Lily might be too." "Lily? What do you mean?" Emma took a seat across from him, cradling a mug of tea between her hands. "She's in the barn reading to him. He's listening, or at least his ears are." Lucas raised his eyebrows. "That's more than he's done all day." "Sometimes the most wounded souls recognize each other," Emma said softly. "Maybe they can help each other heal in ways we can't." As the night deepened around Willow Creek Farm, two broken spirits, one human, one equine, began the tentative first steps of a journey neither could have imagined. In the quiet darkness of the barn, surrounded by the gentle sounds of night, a girl read stories of courage to a horse who had forgotten his own. Days at Willow Creek Farm followed a gentle rhythm that had remained unchanged for years. Mornings began early, with feeding and care routines for the animals. Afternoons were often dedicated to Emma's therapeutic riding sessions with local children, while evenings brought a peaceful winding down as the sun set behind the distant hills. It was a healing rhythm, predictable and safe, exactly what traumatized souls, both human and animal, needed most. Thunder's first week passed without dramatic change. He ate minimally, moved rarely, and continued to avoid eye contact with humans who approached his stall. Emma checked on him frequently, speaking in soft tones and offering treats he rarely accepted. Lucas made sure his stall was clean and comfortable. Both were patient, understanding that recovery couldn't be rushed. What they didn't know was that every night after dinner, when the farm grew quiet, Lily would slip into the barn with her book and sit outside Thunder's stall, reading aloud until her voice grew hoarse or her eyelids too heavy to keep open. Sometimes she'd fall asleep there, her book open on her lap, until Emma or Lucas would find her and gently guide her back to the house. On the 8th day, Emma decided it was time to try something new. The morning was clear and mild, perfect for Thunder's first venture outside since his arrival. "We'll use the small paddock behind the barn," she told Lucas as they prepared for the day. "It's quiet there, no distractions, and he'll be able to see the barn door if he gets anxious." Lucas nodded, understanding her strategy. "Want me to help?" "Actually," Emma said, her gaze drifting toward the farmhouse where Lily was finishing her breakfast, "I was thinking of asking Lily." Lucas raised his eyebrows. "Are you sure? Thunder's still pretty unpredictable, and Lily has been spending more time with him than either of us," Emma finished. "I've seen her in the barn every night this week, and I think he might be responding to her even if it's subtle." With gentle persuasion, Emma convinced Lily to join them. The girl approached cautiously, her usual defensive posture softened by genuine concern. "Will he be scared outside?" Lily asked as they walked toward Thunder's stall. "He might be," Emma admitted, "but horses aren't meant to stay in stalls forever. They need sunshine, fresh grass, room to move, and sometimes facing our fears is the only way past them." Lily considered this, her young face serious. "Like exposure therapy?" Emma glanced at her, surprised. "Yes, exactly like that. How do you know about exposure therapy?" Lily shrugged, her gaze fixed firmly ahead. "My counselor tried it with me after the accident. It didn't work." Before Emma could respond to this unexpected revelation, they arrived at Thunder's stall. The horse was standing in his usual corner, his magnificent body still except for the occasional flick of his tail. "Good morning, Thunder," Emma said softly. "We thought you might like to go outside today." The horse didn't react, not even an ear twitch. Emma slowly opened the stall door and stepped inside with a halter. As she approached, Thunder shifted slightly, moving further into his corner. "It's okay," Emma soothed. "Just a little time in the sunshine." But as she reached toward him, Thunder's breathing quickened, his eyes showing the whites. Years of experience told Emma to back off before his anxiety escalated, but before she could retreat, Lily spoke from the doorway. "Thunder," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "It's just a halter. Like in the story I read you last night, remember? About the horse who was afraid of bridges but crossed one to help his friend." To Emma's astonishment, Thunder's ears swiveled toward Lily's voice, and his breathing steadied slightly. The girl took a tentative step into the stall. "Lily, be careful," Emma warned, but there was something in the girl's demeanor that gave her pause. Lily wasn't afraid. She was moving with a careful confidence that belied her years. "He's just scared," Lily said, not taking her eyes off the horse. "Like I used to be scared of elevators after Mom and Dad died. Everyone kept saying it would get better, but it just made me mad." She took another step closer. "No one understands until they've been really scared of something." Thunder remained still as Lily approached, his eyes now fixed on her. She stopped an arm's length away, not reaching for him, simply standing there. "You don't have to go outside if you don't want to," she told the horse. "But it's nice out there. I could read to you under the oak tree instead of in this dark stall." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, Thunder lowered his head toward Lily. The movement was slight, a matter of inches, but to Emma, who had watched the horse remain rigidly aloof for days, it was remarkable. "Would you like to try putting the halter on?" Emma asked Lily, holding it out. Lily hesitated, then nodded, taking the halter with careful hands. "My aunt has horses," she explained, seeing Emma's questioning look. "I used to help with them, before." With slow, deliberate movements, Lily approached Thunder, speaking in a continuous, gentle stream. "It's okay if you're still scared. Being scared doesn't mean you're weak. That's what my counselor said. I didn't believe her then, but maybe she was right." To Emma's amazement, Thunder allowed Lily to slip the halter over his nose and secure it behind his ears. He flinched once when the buckle clinked, but he didn't pull away. "That's incredible, Lily," Emma said softly. "You have a gift with him." Lily shrugged, but Emma caught the flash of pride in her eyes. "Can I lead him outside?" Emma hesitated only briefly. "Yes, but I'll be right beside you both." The journey from the stall to the small paddock was tense. Thunder balked twice, his body trembling as they approached the barn doors. Each time, Lily stopped with him, waiting patiently until he seemed ready to try again. She kept talking to him, her voice a gentle constant in his ear. "The sun feels good, doesn't it?" she said as they finally stepped outside. "And look at the grass. Much better than that old hay." In the paddock, Emma helped Lily remove the halter. Thunder stood frozen, his muscles tense as if ready to bolt, but there was nowhere to run. The paddock, while spacious enough for comfortable movement, was securely fenced and peaceful. "What now?" Lily asked, watching Thunder with concern. "Now we wait," Emma said. "Let him adjust at his own pace." They retreated to the fence but remained watching. For nearly an hour, Thunder didn't move from the spot where they'd left him. The sun climbed higher, warming his dull coat, while a gentle breeze ruffled his mane. Occasionally, he would scan his surroundings, his nostrils flaring at new scents, but he made no attempt to explore. "He's still scared," Lily observed, disappointment evident in her voice. "Yes," Emma agreed, "but he's outside feeling the sun on his back. A week ago, I wouldn't have thought that possible." Lily considered this, then nodded slowly. "Small steps." "Exactly. Recovery isn't a straight line, Lily. It's a winding path with setbacks and victories, sometimes on the same day." As they watched, Thunder finally lowered his head and tentatively nibbled at the grass beneath his hooves. It was a small gesture, but both Lily and Emma recognized it for what it was, a tiny choice to engage with the world again, to acknowledge a simple pleasure. "Look," Lily whispered, a rare smile lighting her face. "He's eating." "Yes," Emma said, her own heart lightening at the sight. "Thanks to you." The days that followed brought small but significant changes to both Thunder and Lily. Each morning, the girl would arrive at the barn before breakfast, her hair still tousled from sleep, eager to help lead Thunder to the paddock. What had once been a tense journey fraught with the horse's fear became a quiet ritual they shared. Thunder still moved cautiously, his powerful body tense at sudden noises, but he no longer balked at the barn door or trembled at the sight of open space. For her part, Lily began to shed layers of her defensive armor. Emma noticed how the girl's shoulders relaxed when she was with Thunder, how her perpetual scowl softened into thoughtful concentration. She spoke more, though mostly to the horse rather than to the humans around her. When Emma or Lucas tried to draw her into conversation, Lily would retreat behind one-word answers and averted eyes, but with Thunder, words flowed easily. "I think he understands me," Lily told Emma one afternoon as they watched Thunder graze. This revelation, offered voluntarily, was itself a breakthrough. "When I talk to him, he listens differently than people do." "How so?" Emma asked, careful to keep her tone casual, not wanting to spook Lily back into silence. Lily considered the question, her eyes never leaving Thunder. "People listen for their turn to talk, or they listen like they're trying to fix you." She plucked a blade of grass, twirling it between her fingers. "Thunder just listens, like he gets that sometimes stories don't have solutions." Emma nodded, struck by the wisdom in the observation. "Animals can be like that. They don't have expectations about how we should be or what we should say." "Yeah," Lily agreed softly. "Exactly like that." On the third week after Thunder's arrival, Emma received a phone call that would test the fragile progress they'd made. It was Lucas who brought her the news, finding her in the tack room sorting through equipment for the afternoon's therapy sessions. That was Wellington's office, he said, his expression troubled. They want Thunder back. Emma's hand stilled on the saddle she was cleaning. What? Why? Richard said Wellington had written him off completely. Lucas leaned against the door frame, his usually relaxed demeanor tense. Apparently, some racing magazine did a feature on forgotten champions. Thunder was mentioned, his accident, his recovery, his sale to a small therapeutic farm. The article suggested Wellington had discarded a valuable animal without giving him proper time to heal. And now his ego is bruised, Emma finished, anger rising in her chest. His reputation, more likely. The racing community is tight-knit. He's claiming he never authorized the sale, that Richard acted without permission. Emma set down the saddle with more force than necessary. That's ridiculous. Richard had all the proper paperwork. Wellington is saying it was forged. He's threatening legal action if we don't return Thunder voluntarily. Return him? To what? Richard told me Wellington was sending him to slaughter. Lucas's face was grim. Wellington is claiming he had arranged for specialized rehabilitation at some exclusive equine center in Kentucky. He's framing it like we stole Thunder from a bright future. Emma closed her eyes, trying to calm the rage building inside her. She had seen too many animals discarded when they ceased to be profitable. Too many magnificent creatures treated as disposable commodities. We have the paperwork. We can fight this. With what money, Em? Wellington has a team of lawyers on retainer. We'd be bankrupt before we even got to court. The truth of this hung heavily between them. Willow Creek operated on a shoestring budget, sustained by modest program fees, donations, and Emma's own stubborn refusal to give up when finances got tight. They couldn't afford a protracted legal battle against someone like Maxwell Wellington. How long do we have? She finally asked. They want him by the end of the week, Lucas replied, his voice soft with defeat. Emma's mind raced, searching for solutions, alternatives, any way to protect the horse who had just begun to find his way back to life. But beneath the tactical considerations lay a deeper concern. How do we tell Lily? The question lingered, unanswered, as they both contemplated the impact this news would have on the girl who had formed such a profound connection with Thunder. That evening, as the sun cast long shadows across the farm, Emma found Lily in the paddock with Thunder. The scene before her made her heart ache. Lily sat cross-legged in the grass, reading aloud from a book while Thunder grazed nearby, occasionally lifting his head to listen, his ears pricked forward attentively. It was such a contrast to the lifeless animal who had arrived at Willow Creek just weeks ago. Emma hesitated at the fence, reluctant to shatter this peaceful moment with the weight of her news. But as if sensing her presence, Lily looked up, meeting her gaze with sudden wariness. The girl had always been perceptive, quick to detect shifts in emotional currents around her. "What's wrong?" she asked, closing her book. Emma took a deep breath and entered the paddock, coming to sit beside Lily in the grass. Thunder watched them both, his dark eyes now alert and engaged with his surroundings in a way that would have seemed impossible 3 weeks ago. "Lily, there's something I need to tell you about Thunder," Emma began, choosing her words carefully. "His former owner is saying there was a mistake with the paperwork when I bought him. He wants Thunder back." Lily stared at her, uncomprehending at first, then with growing alarm. "Back? He can't go back. He was miserable there. You said so yourself." "I know," Emma agreed softly. "And I'm going to try everything I can to keep him here. But I need you to understand that sometimes, even when we fight our hardest, things don't work out the way we want them to." "You're giving up?" Lily's voice rose, startling Thunder, who lifted his head sharply. "You're just going to let them take him?" "No, Lily, that's not what I'm saying. I'm going to fight, but you don't think you'll win," Lily finished, her face flushing with anger. "Adults always say they'll try, but what they mean is they've already decided to fail." Lily. The girl was on her feet now, tears threatening but held back by sheer force of will. You can't let them take him. He trusts us now. He's getting better. If he goes back there, he'll... Her voice broke, unable to complete the thought. Thunder sensed the tension, moving closer to Lily with an alertness that showed how far he had come from the despondent animal who had arrived at Willow Creek. He lowered his head to nudge Lily's shoulder gently, as if offering comfort. The gesture only seemed to intensify Lily's distress. She wrapped her arms around Thunder's neck, burying her face in his mane. "I won't let them take you," she whispered fiercely. "I promise." Emma watched, her heart breaking for both of them. In Thunder, Lily had found a silent confidant, someone who carried wounds as deep as her own. And in Lily, Thunder had found a reason to engage with the world again. To separate them now, just as they were beginning to heal each other, seemed unthinkably cruel. But Maxwell Wellington was not a man known for his compassion, and Emma knew that the battle ahead would require more than just righteous anger. It would take strategy, resources, and perhaps a miracle. As twilight descended over Willow Creek Farm, Emma made a silent promise of her own. She would find a way to keep Thunder where he belonged, not for her sake, but for Lily's, and for the broken but healing spirit of the horse who had found his way back to life in the most unexpected of friendships. The next morning, Emma sat at her small desk in the corner of the farmhouse kitchen, surrounded by papers and a rising sense of desperation. She had been up since dawn, reviewing Thunder's sale documents, making calls to everyone she knew in the equestrian community, searching for anyone who might help them stand against Wellington's legal threats. Lucas hovered nearby, refilling her coffee cup and offering suggestions that grew increasingly far-fetched as the morning wore on. "What about that reporter who did the piece on our program last year?" he asked. "Maybe she could write a follow-up, get public opinion on our side." Emma shook her head, rubbing her tired eyes. "Wellington owns half the racing publications in the country. No one would touch the story." She sighed, looking out the window toward the barn where Thunder was safely stabled. "We need something more concrete than public sentiment. We need legal standing." The sound of the screen door slamming made them both turn. Lily stood in the doorway, her face set in determined lines that made her look older than her 12 years. "I called my aunt," she announced without preamble. Emma and Lucas exchanged a quick glance. Lily's relationship with her aunt was complicated at best. Margaret Taylor was Lily's legal guardian, but her high-powered corporate job kept her traveling most of the year. Sending Lily to Willow Creek for the summer had been as much about convenience as therapy. "Oh?" Emma said carefully. "What did she say?" "She's coming here, today." Lily crossed her arms over her chest, a defensive posture Emma had come to recognize. She knows people who can help Thunder. Before Emma could respond, the farm's ancient phone rang. Lucas answered it, his expression quickly shifting from curiosity to concern. "It's Richard," he mouthed to Emma, handing her the receiver. "Emma, it's Richard from Blackwood," came the familiar voice, tense with urgency. "I heard what's happening with Thunder. Wellington's people have been all over the stables, questioning everyone about the sale. Richard, I don't understand how this is happening. The paperwork was in order." "It was," Richard confirmed grimly. "But Wellington is claiming I acted without authorization, that I forged his signature. He's made it clear that if I contradict him, I'll not only lose my job but be blacklisted from every racing stable in the country." Emma's heart sank. Without Richard's testimony, their already slim chances of keeping Thunder diminished further. "So you're calling to tell me you can't help us?" There was a pause on the line. "I'm calling to warn you. Wellington isn't just sending lawyers. He's sending men to collect Thunder tomorrow morning. He's not waiting for legal channels." Emma's grip on the phone tightened. "He can't do that. That's theft." Not if he can convince local authorities that Thunder was stolen from him in the first place, Richard countered. He has influence, Emma, more than you know. After the call ended, Emma relayed the news to Lucas and Lily, watching the girl's face crumple, then harden with resolve. We need to hide him, Lily declared. We can take him somewhere they won't find him. That would be kidnapping, Lily, Emma said gently. It would only make things worse. Worse than letting them take him? Lily's voice rose, edged with desperation. You don't understand what this means to him, to me. I do understand, Emma insisted, reaching for Lily's hand, which the girl promptly yanked away. But breaking the law isn't the answer. There has to be another way. There isn't, Lily shouted, tears finally spilling onto her cheeks. Adults always say that, but sometimes there are no good options. Sometimes everything is just broken. The raw pain in her voice silenced both Emma and Lucas. They watched helplessly as Lily fled from the kitchen, the screen door banging shut behind her. She's headed for the barn, Lucas observed quietly. Emma nodded, her own eyes wet. Let her have some time with him. I'll check on her in a bit. The hours that followed were a blur of activity. Emma made more calls, exploring every possible avenue to delay Wellington's men. Lucas drove into town to speak with a friend who worked at the local police station, hoping to at least ensure that any confrontation would have witnesses. By mid-afternoon, they had exhausted most of their options, but gained the promise that a deputy would be present when Wellington's people arrived. Emma was just contemplating how to break the news to Lily when a sleek black car turned into the farm's driveway, stirring up dust clouds that glowed golden in the late afternoon light. A woman emerged, tall, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit despite the rural setting, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. Even without the physical resemblance to Lily, Emma would have recognized Margaret Taylor from their brief meetings at the beginning of summer. Ms. Taylor, Emma greeted her, stepping out onto the porch. This is unexpected. Margaret's expression was unreadable as she surveyed the modest farm. Lily called me. Something about a horse being taken away. Her voice was crisp, professional, revealing nothing of her thoughts. Where is she? In the barn, I believe, Emma replied. With Thunder. That's the horse in question. Margaret nodded once, then surprised Emma by heading directly toward the barn, rather than asking for further explanation. Emma followed, curious and slightly wary. Margaret Taylor had never shown much interest in Lily's activities at the farm during their weekly check-in calls. What had changed? They found Lily in Thunder's stall, sitting on a hay bale, her hand resting on the horse's neck as she spoke to him in low tones. The horse, who weeks ago would have retreated to his corner at the approach of strangers, now stood calmly beside the girl, his eyes alert, but no longer haunted by fear. Aunt Margaret, Lily acknowledged without looking up. You came. I said I would, Margaret replied, her professional demeanor softening slightly as she took in the scene before her. Is this the horse you told me about? Lily nodded, finally turning to face her aunt. His name is Thunder. They want to take him away, but he needs to stay here. He trusts me. Margaret studied her niece's face with an intensity that suggested she was seeing something new there. You've been reading to him, she observed, nodding toward the book beside Lily. Every night, Lily confirmed. He likes it. Something passed between aunt and niece then, a silent communication that Emma couldn't quite interpret. Margaret's expression shifted, determination replacing her previous reserve. Ms. Taylor, Emma began. I should explain the situation. Lily already explained, Margaret interrupted, her gaze still fixed on her niece and Thunder. A wealthy man is using his influence to reclaim an animal he previously discarded, with no concern for the animal's welfare or the legal validity of the original sale. Emma blinked, surprised by the accurate assessment. Yes, that's essentially it. Margaret finally turned to face Emma, her expression resolute. "I'm a corporate attorney, Ms. Taylor. I specialize in cases where powerful entities attempt to bully smaller ones into submission." She straightened her already impeccable posture. "I find such tactics distasteful." Hope, fragile but persistent, flickered in Emma's chest. "Are you saying you might help us?" "I'm saying I will help you," Margaret corrected. "Wellington's strategy relies on intimidation and the assumption that you lack the resources to fight back. Both of those calculations are about to prove incorrect." For the first time that day, Emma felt the crushing weight of despair begin to lift. In Margaret Taylor, they had found an unexpected ally, one with the skills and resources to potentially level the playing field against Maxwell Wellington. As they left the barn together to discuss strategy, Emma glanced back to see Lily still sitting with Thunder, her hand gently stroking his neck. The girl's expression had softened, the desperate fear replaced by cautious hope. It wasn't a resolution, not yet, but it was something equally precious. The possibility that the healing bond between a wounded girl and a wounded horse might survive after all. Dawn broke over Willow Creek Farm with a tension that seemed to seep into every corner of the property. Even the animals sensed it. The therapy horses nickered nervously in their stalls. The farm's resident dogs paced restlessly, and Thunder, the eye of this gathering storm, stood alert in his stall, ears pricked forward as if listening for approaching danger. In the farmhouse kitchen, Emma, Lucas, and Margaret sat around the worn wooden table, empty coffee mugs scattered between them. They had been up most of the night developing a strategy that might give them a fighting chance against Wellington. Margaret, her suit now slightly rumpled from hours of work, was reviewing documents on her sleek laptop while speaking rapidly into her cell phone. "Yes, I need that restraining order signed and delivered to the county sheriff's office by 8 a.m., she was saying, her voice crisp and authoritative. "Judge Hanson owes me a favor. Remind him of the Westlake case if he hesitates." Emma watched with a mixture of awe and gratitude. In just 12 hours, Margaret had mobilized a response that would have taken Emma weeks to organize, if she could have managed it at all. Legal documents had been drafted and filed electronically, contacts in the local government had been leveraged, and a media strategy had been mapped out should Wellington attempt to take the dispute public. "Wellington's men will still come," Lucas said quietly as Margaret ended her call. "Richard said they're not waiting for legal channels." Margaret nodded, her expression grim but determined. "I'm counting on it. Sometimes the best way to counter a bully is to let them overplay their hand. If Wellington's people attempt to remove Thunder while a restraining order is in place, that gives us additional legal leverage." "But what if the restraining order doesn't arrive in time?" Emma asked, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her since Richard's warning. "Then we document everything," Margaret replied. "Every word, every action. I have a colleague with a video camera on his way here now. If they take Thunder without proper legal authority, we'll have evidence of theft." The sound of footsteps on the stairs interrupted their conversation. Lily appeared in the doorway, looking as though she hadn't slept at all. Her eyes were shadowed, her face pale with worry. "Did you stay up all night?" she asked her aunt, taking in the scene around the kitchen table. Something softened in Margaret's expression, a tenderness Emma hadn't observed before. "Some battles require preparation, Lily. This one is worth the effort." Lily nodded solemnly, then turned to Emma. "I want to be with Thunder when they come." Emma hesitated, exchanging a glance with Margaret. The confrontation ahead could turn ugly, not the kind of scene a 12-year-old should witness. But before either woman could respond, Lily continued, her voice steady with conviction. "He trusts me. If strangers try to take him, he'll be scared. I need to be there." Margaret studied her niece thoughtfully. "She's right," she said finally. "Thunder's state of mind could be relevant if this case proceeds to court. If he shows clear distress at being separated from Lily, it strengthens our argument about his welfare. Emma wasn't entirely comfortable with the decision, but she recognized the determination in Lily's eyes. It was the same resolve she had shown when first connecting with Thunder, a steadfast commitment that belied her years. "All right," Emma agreed reluctantly, "but you stay with Lucas or me at all times, and if things get tense, you'll go inside when we say so. No arguments." Lily nodded, relief evident in her expression. "I'll go to him now," she said, already turning toward the door. "Wait," Margaret called. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small device. "Take this. It's a digital recorder. If anyone speaks to Thunder or to you while you're with him, I want it recorded." Lily took the recorder with careful hands, the responsibility of the task clearly registering on her young face. As she left for the barn, Emma turned to Margaret with newfound respect. "You're good at this," she observed, "using every advantage." Margaret's lips curved in a small, satisfied smile. "I didn't become the youngest partner at my firm by ignoring tactical opportunities. Wellington thinks he's dealing with an easy target, a small farm with no resources. He's about to discover his miscalculation." By 8:30, the farm was as prepared as it could be. The restraining order had been delivered to the sheriff's office, though confirmation of its formal acceptance was still pending. Margaret's colleague, a balding man with kind eyes and professional-grade camera equipment, had arrived and taken up a strategic position near the main entrance. Lucas had enlisted 2 friends from neighboring farms to serve as additional witnesses, and Emma had called each of her staff members, asking them to delay their arrival until the situation was resolved. At precisely 9 o'clock, a convoy of vehicles turned into the farm's long driveway, a black SUV followed by a large horse trailer with Blackwood Stables emblazoned on its side. Emma's heart sank at the sight of the trailer. Wellington's men had come prepared to take Thunder immediately. "Here we go," Lucas muttered, standing beside Emma on the porch. Margaret had positioned herself near the barn entrance, her posture straight and commanding despite being significantly outnumbered. 3 men emerged from the SUV. 2 were clearly handlers dressed in Blackwood Stables uniforms. The third was a tall, lean man in an expensive suit, his silver hair perfectly groomed, his bearing imperious. Even without having met him before, Emma recognized Maxwell Wellington. His presence was unexpected. Richard had indicated he would send representatives, not come himself. Wellington approached Margaret first, clearly identifying her as the authority figure based on her attire and stance. "I believe you're trespassing on private property," Margaret said before Wellington could speak, her voice carrying across the yard with practiced projection. "Willow Creek Farm is not open to visitors today." Wellington's eyebrows rose in surprise, then lowered in annoyance. "I'm here to reclaim stolen property," he countered smoothly. "A valuable racehorse that was removed from my stables without proper authorization." "If you're referring to the thoroughbred named Thunder," Margaret replied, "he was purchased legally by Emma Taylor of Willow Creek Farm, with full documentation that I'd be happy to show you. Furthermore, a temporary restraining order has been filed prohibiting the removal of said horse pending legal review." Wellington's expression darkened. "I don't know who you are, madam, but you're interfering in a matter that doesn't concern you. Margaret Taylor, of Pressman, Taylor, and Webb," she introduced herself, the name of the prestigious law firm clearly registering with Wellington based on his slight flinch. "I represent both Willow Creek Farm and my niece, Lily Taylor, who has established a therapeutic relationship with Thunder that would be severely damaged by his removal." Inside the barn, Lily stood beside Thunder's stall, the recorder clutched tightly in her hand, listening to the confrontation unfolding outside. Thunder seemed to sense the tension, his ears flicking nervously, his body tense and alert. Lily placed a gentle hand on his neck, feeling the rapid thrum of his pulse beneath her fingers. "It's okay," she whispered, though her own heart was racing. "I won't let them take you. I promise." Outside, the standoff continued, Wellington's initial confidence visibly eroding as Margaret calmly countered each of his assertions with legal precision. What had begun as a simple intimidation tactic was evolving into a complex legal dispute. Exactly the scenario Wellington had hoped to avoid by sending men to simply collect the horse without formalities. As voices rose and the confrontation intensified, Thunder grew increasingly agitated, pacing his stall, his eyes rolling with remembered fear. Lily spoke to him continuously, her voice steady despite her anxiety, reminding him of their shared stories, of the trust they had built together, of the safety they had found in each other. "Remember the story about the storm?" she murmured. "How the horse and the girl found shelter together? That's us, Thunder. We're sheltering each other." And somehow, miraculously, in the midst of chaos and fear, the magnificent animal stilled at the sound of her voice, finding in her presence an anchor against the rising tide of panic. The standoff in the yard had reached a critical point. Wellington, his face flushed with anger, stood toe-to-toe with Margaret, whose composed demeanor only seemed to infuriate him further. Emma and Lucas watched from the sidelines, tense but hopeful, as Margaret expertly parried each of Wellington's increasingly desperate arguments. "This is absurd," Wellington finally snapped, his veneer of sophisticated control cracking. "That horse is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm not going to let him waste away at some backwater therapy farm because of paperwork technicalities." "Interesting that you mention his value," Margaret countered smoothly. "According to Richard Stanley, your head trainer, you considered Thunder worthless after his accident. In fact, you specifically instructed him to dispose of the horse at Hartman's processing plant." Wellington's jaw tightened. "That's a lie. Richard would never claim such a thing." "Actually," Margaret continued, tapping something on her phone, "I have a sworn affidavit from Mr. Stanley stating exactly that, signed last night and notarized. It seems your threats to blacklist him were less persuasive than his conscience." This revelation hit Wellington like a physical blow. His confident posture faltered, and for the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. The two handlers exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly unprepared for this level of resistance. "If you attempt to remove Thunder from these premises," Margaret pressed her advantage, "we will immediately file charges for attempted theft, fraud, and animal endangerment. The media would be particularly interested in how a celebrated racehorse owner tried to send his champion to slaughter, then lied about it when the story became public." Wellington's expression shifted from anger to calculation. Emma could almost see him reassessing his position, weighing the potential damage to his reputation against his desire to reclaim Thunder. The silence stretched taut between them, broken only by the distant nickering of horses and the soft whir of the video camera documenting every moment. Inside the barn, Lily remained at Thunder's side, whispering reassurances as he grew increasingly anxious. Though the walls muffled the argument outside, the tension in the air was palpable. Thunder paced his stall, nostrils flaring, his body trembling with remembered trauma. "It's okay," Lily murmured, keeping her hand on his neck, feeling the rapid pulse beneath her fingers. "You're safe here. They can't take you." But even as she spoke the words, doubt gnawed at her. Adults had promised her safety before, had assured her that everything would be all right, only for her world to collapse anyway. What if the same happened now? What if, despite all their preparations, Wellington somehow won? The thought sent a spike of panic through her, which Thunder immediately sensed. The horse snorted, backing away from her touch, his eyes wild with rising fear. Lily realized with sudden clarity that her own anxiety was feeding his. If she wanted to help Thunder, she needed to find calm within herself first. Taking a deep breath, Lily closed her eyes and remembered the techniques her therapist had taught her after the accident. Find your center. Focus on your breath. Name 5 things you can sense right now. She inhaled slowly. The sweet scent of hay, the distant sound of voices, the rough texture of the wooden stall door beneath her hand, the cool morning air on her skin, the solid, steady presence of Thunder nearby. When she opened her eyes, she found Thunder watching her, his panicked movements stilled, his intelligent eyes fixed on her face with something like curiosity. Somehow, in calming herself, she had managed to communicate reassurance to him as well. "That's it," she said softly, her voice steadier now. "We're going to be okay. I believe that. Do you?" Thunder nickered softly, lowering his magnificent head to nudge her shoulder gently. The gesture filled Lily with a warmth that pushed back against her fear. Whatever happened, they would face it together. Outside, the confrontation had reached its breaking point. Wellington, seeing that his intimidation tactics had failed, changed strategies with the fluid adaptability that had made him successful in business. "Perhaps we can come to some arrangement," he suggested, his tone suddenly conciliatory. "A financial settlement that would compensate Willow Creek Farm for its investment in Thunder's rehabilitation." Margaret's expression remained neutral, but Emma could see the flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. Wellington was negotiating, a tacit acknowledgement that his position wasn't as strong as he'd claimed. "We're not interested in money," Emma interjected, stepping forward to stand beside Margaret. "Thunder is not for sale." Wellington turned to her, his gaze dismissive. "Everyone has a price, Ms. Taylor. Name yours." "Thunder isn't merchandise," Emma replied firmly. "He's a living being who's formed a therapeutic bond with a child who needs him just as much as he needs her." Wellington's lip curled slightly. "Spare me the sentimentality. That horse was bred for racing, not babysitting troubled children." The callousness of his words hung in the air, sharper than any legal threat. Before Emma could respond, the barn door opened and Lily emerged, leading Thunder by a simple halter. The sight stopped everyone in their tracks. Thunder, who weeks ago had been too traumatized to leave his stall, was walking calmly beside the small figure of Lily, his massive body dwarfing her but following her lead with gentle attentiveness. His coat, once dull with neglect, now shone with the results of Lily's daily grooming. His head was held higher, his gait steadier, his eyes clear and focused. It was a striking transformation, one that even Wellington couldn't fail to notice. "Lily," Emma called, alarmed, "I told you to stay in the barn." "Thunder wanted to show everyone that he's not afraid anymore," Lily replied, her young voice carrying across the yard with unexpected authority. "That he's not broken." She led the horse forward until they stood before Wellington. Man and horse regarded each other. The businessman whose calculations had deemed Thunder worthless, and the animal whose spirit had proven more resilient than anyone had anticipated. "You were going to kill him," Lily said directly to Wellington, her eyes unflinching despite the presence of so many adults. "Because he got hurt and was scared." Wellington's expression tightened. "Young lady, you don't understand the economics of—" "I understand that you thought he couldn't be fixed," Lily interrupted, a boldness in her voice that Emma had never heard before. "But Thunder didn't need fixing. He needed someone to believe in him again." To demonstrate her point, Lily unclipped the lead rope from Thunder's halter, leaving him completely free. Wellington's handlers tensed, clearly expecting the horse to bolt or become aggressive, but Thunder remained calmly beside Lily, his trust in her evident to everyone watching. "Thunder," Lily said clearly, stepping away from the horse and extending her hand. "Come." For a breathless moment, no one moved. Then, with deliberate dignity, Thunder walked to Lily, lowering his head to her outstretched hand in a gesture of such trust and affection that it sent a palpable ripple of emotion through the onlookers. Even Wellington seemed affected, his calculating expression faltering as he witnessed the bond between the girl and the horse he had discarded. For perhaps the first time, he was seeing Thunder not as an investment or a liability, but as a sentient being capable of recovery, relationship, and trust. In that moment, something shifted in the atmosphere of the confrontation. The legal arguments, the financial calculations, the threats and counter-threats, all seemed suddenly secondary to the simple truth before them. A wounded horse and a wounded child had found healing in each other, a bond that transcended ownership documents and dollar values. Margaret, ever perceptive, seized the moment. "Mr. Wellington," she said quietly, "I think we need to reconsider what's really at stake here." The silence that followed Margaret's words seemed to stretch across the farm, broken only by the soft sound of Thunder's breathing as he stood faithfully beside Lily. Wellington's face was a study in conflicting emotions, irritation at being challenged, calculation of his dwindling options, and something else, something almost like regret, as he watched the horse he had so easily discarded. "What exactly are you proposing?" he finally asked, his voice quieter than before. Margaret glanced at Emma, who nodded slightly, giving her the authority to proceed. "A compromise," Margaret suggested, "one that acknowledges both the legal complexities and the welfare of the animal in question." Wellington's eyes narrowed. "Go on." "Thunder remains at Willow Creek Farm," Margaret stated firmly. "His physical and emotional rehabilitation continues under Emma Taylor's supervision, with my niece's assistance." "And what do I get out of this arrangement?" Wellington demanded, though his tone lacked its earlier sharpness. Margaret smiled slightly. "Public recognition. We issue a joint statement announcing that Maxwell Wellington, in his commitment to the welfare of his former champion, has generously donated Thunder to Willow Creek's therapeutic riding program. We emphasize your dedication to giving retired racehorses second careers." The story becomes one of philanthropy rather than abandonment. Emma watched Wellington's expression shift as he processed the offer. It was a masterful suggestion, allowing him to save face, possibly even gain positive publicity, while still achieving what Emma and Lily wanted most: keeping Thunder at Willow Creek. "There would need to be financial considerations as well," Wellington countered, ever the businessman. "A tax receipt for the value of the donation, at minimum." "Naturally," Margaret agreed smoothly. "We can discuss the details with our respective accountants." Wellington studied Thunder once more, his gaze calculating yet somehow softened. "He does look improved," he admitted reluctantly. "You've done good work with him." "Not me," Emma corrected gently, nodding toward Lily. "Her." Wellington regarded the young girl with newfound consideration. "You're not afraid of him, after what happened in his last race?" Lily stroked Thunder's neck, her small hand sure and steady against his powerful frame. "Everyone gets scared sometimes," she said simply. "It doesn't mean they're broken forever." Something in her words seemed to reach Wellington in a way that legal threats and negotiations had not. He stood silent for a long moment, then gave a short, decisive nod. "Draft the agreement," he told Margaret. "My lawyers will review it by end of day." With that, the tension that had gripped the farm all morning began to dissipate. Wellington's handlers returned to their vehicles. The trailer remained empty, and Margaret stepped aside to make necessary phone calls. Emma felt a wave of relief so powerful it nearly brought her to her knees. Lucas approached, grinning widely. "Did we just win?" "I think we did," Emma replied, watching as Wellington spoke quietly with his driver. "Or at least we found a solution everyone can live with." "All thanks to Margaret," Lucas observed. Who would have thought Lily's aunt would turn out to be our secret weapon? Emma smiled, her gaze shifting to where Lily still stood with Thunder. I think our real secret weapon was right there all along. Later that afternoon, as the details of the agreement were being finalized in the farmhouse, Lily sat cross-legged in Thunder's paddock, reading aloud from her book while the horse grazed peacefully nearby. The scene was so ordinary, so tranquil, that it was hard to believe it had almost been shattered just hours earlier. Margaret approached the fence, having shed her formal suit jacket in concession to the warm afternoon. She watched her niece for a moment before speaking. "The paperwork is almost complete," she said. "Thunder will officially belong to Willow Creek by evening." Lily looked up, relief evident in her face. "For real? He gets to stay forever?" Margaret nodded, a rare smile softening her usually composed features. "Forever. Wellington has even agreed to provide funding for his ongoing care, though that part will remain confidential." Lily's eyes widened. "You got him to pay for Thunder to stay here? How?" "Let's just say I appealed to his better nature," Margaret replied, with a small, satisfied smile that suggested more complex negotiations had taken place out of Lily's hearing. Thunder lifted his head at that moment, regarding Margaret with what almost seemed like curiosity before returning to his grazing. The casual movement, so different from the traumatized horse who had arrived at Willow Creek, wasn't lost on Margaret. "You've done remarkable work with him," she observed, her voice gentler than Lily had heard it in years. "He trusts you completely." Lily shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just read to him and talked to him. It wasn't anything special." "On the contrary," Margaret disagreed, carefully opening the paddock gate to join her niece. "What you gave him was exactly what he needed. Patience, consistency, acceptance. Those are rare gifts, Lily." Lily plucked at the grass beside her, not meeting her aunt's eyes. Since her parents' death, praise had become something foreign and uncomfortable, a reminder of a time when her world made sense. "Your mother would be proud of you," Margaret said quietly, the words clearly difficult for her to speak. She always believed animals could heal in ways humans couldn't understand. Lily's head jerked up, startled by the mention of her mother. Margaret rarely spoke of her sister, the grief still too raw even after 4 years. "You remember that about her?" Margaret nodded, her gaze distant with memory. "She volunteered at an animal shelter all through college. Said the animals didn't judge, didn't expect her to be anything other than exactly who she was." She looked at Thunder, who had moved closer to them, drawn perhaps by the shift in emotional energy. "I think she would have loved seeing you with him." The simple observation, offered without drama or excessive sentiment, reached Lily in a way that years of carefully phrased therapy sessions had not. Her mother would have understood this connection, would have celebrated it rather than analyzing it. "I miss her," Lily whispered, the words escaping before she could contain them. "And Dad, too. Every day." Margaret hesitated, then placed her hand gently on Lily's shoulder, a rare physical gesture from a woman who kept her emotions tightly controlled. "I miss them too." Thunder chose that moment to approach, lowering his head to nudge Lily gently, as if sensing her sadness and offering comfort. Lily reached up to stroke his velvety nose, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I think," Margaret began, then paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "I think perhaps I've been doing this all wrong, Lily. Sending you to different programs, different therapists, different schools, looking for someone to fix what was broken, when maybe what you needed was just space to heal in your own way." Lily looked up at her aunt, surprised by the admission. "What do you mean?" Margaret gestured toward Thunder. "You found your way back to yourself through him, not because anyone forced it, but because you were ready, and he needed you too." She took a deep breath. "I've been thinking, maybe we should consider making some changes." Changes, Lily echoed warily. What would you think about staying here? Not just for the summer, but longer. Perhaps enrolling in the local school, continuing your work with Thunder and the other therapy horses. Lily stared at her aunt, scarcely daring to believe what she was hearing. You mean, live here? At Willow Creek? But what about your job, your apartment in the city? I can work remotely part of the week, Margaret replied, the careful planning evident in her tone. And commute when necessary. It wouldn't be easy, but... She looked around the peaceful farm, at Thunder standing protectively near Lily, at the simple beauty of the place that had accomplished what expensive therapies and strict programs had failed to do. Some things are worth rearranging your life for. Autumn arrived at Willow Creek Farm in a blaze of golden light and fiery colors. The maple trees lining the driveway turned crimson and amber, their leaves carpeting the ground in a rustling tapestry. Mornings were crisp, afternoons mild, and evenings brought a chill that prompted Emma to light the first fire of the season in the farmhouse's old stone fireplace. 3 months had passed since the confrontation with Wellington, 3 months of gradual but profound change for everyone at the farm. True to her word, Margaret had arranged for Lily to stay, renting a small cottage on the property that had previously been used for visiting riding instructors. She divided her time between the farm and her office in the city, adapting her demanding career to accommodate this new life with a flexibility that surprised even herself. For Lily, the transformation was even more remarkable. Enrolled in the local school, she had begun cautiously forming friendships with classmates who shared her newly discovered interest in horses and animal care. Though still quiet, and sometimes withdrawn, the defensive anger that had defined her for years had softened into something more contemplative. Her teachers reported steady academic improvement, noting especially her animated participation in a creative writing project about animal rehabilitation. But the most profound changes could be seen in the relationship between Lily and Thunder. What had begun as a tentative connection between two wounded souls had deepened into a partnership built on absolute trust. Every day after school, Lily would hurry to the barn, where Thunder would greet her with a soft nicker of recognition. Together they developed a routine, grooming, groundwork exercises, and finally, after weeks of patient preparation, riding. The first time Lily mounted Thunder had been a watershed moment for everyone at Willow Creek. Emma had supervised carefully, uncertain whether the former racehorse would accept a rider after his traumatic accident. But Thunder had stood perfectly still as Lily settled into the saddle, his ears pricked forward attentively, waiting for her cues with a trust that brought tears to Emma's eyes. Now, on this crisp October afternoon, Emma watched from the rail of the training ring as Lily guided Thunder through a series of gentle exercises. The girl's posture was relaxed but alert, her hands soft on the reins, communicating with the horse through subtle shifts of weight and quiet words. Thunder moved with growing confidence, his powerful strides measured and deliberate, so different from the headlong gallop of his racing days, yet beautiful in their controlled harmony. "They're remarkable together, aren't they?" Margaret said, joining Emma at the fence. She had arrived from the city an hour earlier, bringing with her a stack of legal documents that now sat forgotten in her leather briefcase. Emma nodded, smiling as Lily guided Thunder through a perfect figure eight. "I've been training therapy horses for 15 years, and I've never seen a bond quite like theirs. It's like they speak a language only they understand." "She talks about him constantly," Margaret admitted. "Even her therapist says Thunder comes up in every session, but in a healthy way. He's become her touchstone, her way of processing everything else." Emma glanced at Margaret, noting the subtle changes in the woman over the past months. The severe bun had loosened into a more relaxed ponytail, her tailored suit sometimes replaced by jeans and sweaters on weekend visits. The rigid corporate attorney was still there, but she seemed to have found room for something softer alongside her professional identity. "How are you adjusting to country life?" Emma asked. "It must be quite a change from your penthouse in the city." Margaret's lips curved in a small, surprised smile. "Honestly, better than I expected. The cottage is small, but there's something clarifying about the simplicity." She paused, watching as Lily leaned forward to pat Thunder's neck after a well-executed turn. "And seeing her like this, it's worth every adjustment." In the ring, Lily had finished her exercises and was walking Thunder in a cool-down circle. Her face was flushed with exertion and pleasure, a smile playing at her lips as she spoke quietly to the horse. Even from a distance, the change in her was evident. The guarded, angry child of summer transformed into someone more open, more present in her own life. "Wellington called yesterday," Emma mentioned, keeping her voice casual. "He's coming for a visit next week. Says he wants to see Thunder's progress." Margaret's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Really? I wouldn't have expected that level of personal interest after our settlement." "I think it's more than legal obligation," Emma replied. "He's been asking detailed questions about Thunder's care, his exercise regimen, his diet, almost like he actually cares." "People can surprise you," Margaret observed, her gaze drifting back to Lily. "Sometimes it takes seeing something, or someone, through new eyes to recognize their true value." As they spoke, Lily guided Thunder toward the gate, his coat gleaming with sweat from the workout, his stride relaxed and confident. "Did you see us?" she called excitedly. He remembered the whole pattern today, even the tricky turn by the water trough. "We saw," Margaret confirmed, her usually reserved expression warming with pride. "You were both excellent." Lily beamed at the praise, straightening in the saddle. "Emma says we might be ready to join the therapy program soon. Not with the little kids yet, but maybe with the older ones who come from the Veterans Center." This was news to Margaret, who looked questioningly at Emma. "Thunder has shown remarkable progress," Emma explained. "And Lily has a natural talent for explaining his signals to others. I think they could work well with some of our adult clients who have trauma responses. There's a certain understanding there that could be valuable." Lily's face glowed with the possibility. Since arriving at Willow Creek, she had watched Emma's therapy sessions with fascination, gradually volunteering to help with simpler tasks. The idea of formally joining the program, of helping others through her connection with Thunder, clearly resonated deeply. "Would that be okay?" Lily asked her aunt, a hint of the old uncertainty creeping into her voice. "I know it would mean more afternoons here instead of at home doing homework right away." "If Emma thinks you're ready, then I trust her judgment," Margaret replied without hesitation. "Your grades are good and this is important work." She smiled slightly. "Besides, I suspect you absorb more life lessons in an hour with Thunder than in a week of middle school." The relief and joy that washed over Lily's face spoke volumes about how far they had come, from a relationship of awkward obligation to one of growing trust and understanding. Much like Thunder, Margaret was learning to open up again, to risk connection despite past wounds. As Lily dismounted and began to untack Thunder, Emma noticed the girl whisper something in the horse's ear, her hand lingering on his gleaming neck. The horse lowered his head to her shoulder in what looked remarkably like an embrace, and for a moment, girl and horse stood perfectly still in the autumn sunlight, two beings who had found in each other the courage to begin again. "You know," Margaret said softly, observing the scene, "when I sent Lily here this summer, I was desperate for someone to fix her. I thought she was broken after everything that happened." She shook her head slightly, as if at her own misconception. "But she didn't need fixing. None of us do, really. We just need the space to heal, and someone who believes we can." Emma nodded, thinking of Thunder's journey from the traumatized horse who had arrived at Willow Creek to the confident, trusting animal before them now. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give each other is just that, belief. The rest follows naturally. As the afternoon light began to soften toward evening, Lily led Thunder back to the barn, her steps light, her conversation with the horse continuous and animated. The horse walked beside her like a guardian, his powerful body gentle in her presence, his trust in her complete. The day of Wellington's visit arrived with a crystalline clarity that seemed to sharpen every color at Willow Creek Farm. The last maple leaves clung stubbornly to their branches, glowing like embers against the pale blue sky. The air carried the scent of frost and wood smoke, a promise of winter held temporarily at bay by the gentle autumn sun. Emma had spent the morning in a flurry of preparation, not out of deference to Wellington's status, but because she wanted him to see Willow Creek at its best. The therapy program had flourished over the past months, with Thunder's remarkable recovery becoming something of a local legend. Families drove from neighboring counties to witness the horse who had once been a champion racer, then a broken spirit and now a healer in his own right. "Is everything ready?" Lucas asked, finding Emma checking Thunder's stall for the third time that morning. "As ready as it can be," she replied, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "Lily's bringing him in from the paddock now." As if summoned by her words, Lily appeared at the barn entrance, leading Thunder with nothing more than a simple halter and lead rope. The horse walked beside her with alert dignity, his coat gleaming chestnut in the sunlight, his muscles rippling with health beneath the specially embroidered blanket Emma had ordered for the occasion. "He looks magnificent," Lucas observed, his voice soft with admiration. It was true. In the month since his arrival, Thunder had transformed physically as well as emotionally. Regular exercise, proper nutrition, and above all, the absence of fear had restored him to a condition that rivaled his racing days. But the most profound change was in his eyes. Once dull with despair, they now held a calm intelligence, an engaged presence that spoke of a spirit fully inhabiting its own power again. "Wellington just pulled in," Lucas warned, glancing toward the driveway where a sleek black car was approaching. Lily stiffened slightly, her hand tightening on Thunder's lead rope. Though she had been prepared for this visit, the memory of their last encounter with Wellington still triggered her protective instincts. "It's okay," Emma assured her. "He's just visiting. Thunder is ours now, legally and completely." Lily nodded, straightening her shoulders. At Emma's suggestion, she had dressed more formally than usual for the occasion. Neat jeans, polished boots, and a deep blue sweater that brought out the color of her eyes. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple braid, revealing a face that had lost some of its childish roundness over the past months, gaining definition and confidence instead. Maxwell Wellington emerged from his car looking somewhat diminished from their last encounter. His designer suit hung a bit looser on his frame, and streaks of gray had appeared at his temples that Emma didn't remember from before. Still, he carried himself with the same authoritative presence, approaching the barn with measured steps, his gaze already fixed on Thunder. "Ms. Taylor," he greeted Emma with a nod. "Thank you for accommodating my visit." "Of course," Emma replied cordially. "We're always happy to update Thunder's supporters on his progress." If Wellington noted the subtle emphasis on supporters rather than owners, he didn't show it. His attention had already shifted to Thunder, his experienced eye assessing the horse's condition with visible surprise. "He looks remarkable," Wellington admitted, genuine appreciation in his voice. "Better than I would have thought possible, given his state after the accident." "Thunder has always had heart," Emma replied. "He just needed the right environment to recover it." Wellington stepped closer, his gaze moving from Thunder to Lily, who stood protectively at the horse's shoulder. "And you must be the young lady I've heard so much about, the one who reached him when no one else could," Lily met his gaze steadily, neither hostile nor welcoming. "His name is Thunder," she said simply, as if that explained everything. A ghost of a smile touched Wellington's lips. "Indeed it is. A name he's living up to once again, from what I hear." He gestured toward the horse. "May I?" Lily hesitated, then gave a short nod, though she didn't move from Thunder's side. Wellington approached slowly, extending his hand palm up for Thunder to investigate. The horse regarded him calmly, nostrils flaring slightly as he caught the man's scent. Then, to everyone's surprise, Thunder lowered his head in greeting, accepting Wellington's cautious touch. "He remembers you," Lily observed. Wellington nodded, something like regret flickering across his features. "We spent years together, though I doubt I knew him as well as you do now." He stroked Thunder's neck with unexpected gentleness. "Richard tells me you've incorporated him into your therapy program." "He works primarily with trauma survivors," Emma confirmed. "Military veterans, first responders, children from difficult backgrounds. There's something about his own journey that resonates with them." "Show me," Wellington requested, his tone making it more of a genuine inquiry than a demand. Emma glanced at Lily, who nodded her agreement. They had prepared for this possibility, arranging for one of their regular participants, a retired Marine named James who had been working with Thunder for several weeks, to join them if Wellington wanted a demonstration. The next hour unfolded with a grace that none of them could have predicted. In the therapy ring, Lily guided Thunder through the exercises she and James had developed together, explaining to Wellington how the horse's responses helped participants recognize their own anxiety triggers and regulation strategies. Thunder performed flawlessly, his movements precise, his attention completely focused on Lily's subtle cues. "It's about building trust," Lily explained, her initial wariness forgotten as she described their work. "Thunder knows what it's like to be afraid, to feel trapped by memories. That's why he can help people who feel the same way." Wellington watched in silence, his expression thoughtful. When the demonstration concluded, he remained quiet for a long moment before speaking. "I've spent 40 years in the racing industry," he finally said. "I've owned champions, broken records, won nearly every prestigious race on the circuit." He paused, his gaze following Thunder as the horse returned to Lily's side, nudging her shoulder affectionately. "But I've never seen anything quite like this." "Like what?" Emma asked. "Purpose," Wellington replied simply. "That horse has found his purpose." He turned to Emma, his customary brusqueness softened by genuine respect. "You were right to fight for him, Ms. Taylor, and I was wrong to discard him." The admission, offered without qualification, hung in the air between them, a bridge across the chasm that had once seemed uncrossable. As they walked back to the barn, Wellington surprised them further by asking detailed questions about the therapy program's funding and expansion plans. By the time he prepared to leave, he had committed to a substantial donation, one that would allow Willow Creek to extend its services to more participants and hire additional staff. "Consider it Thunder's legacy," he said, handing Emma his business card with a handwritten note authorizing the contribution. A better one than trophies gathering dust on a shelf. After Wellington's departure, Emma, Lily, and Margaret gathered in the paddock, watching as Thunder enjoyed the late afternoon sun, rolling luxuriously in a patch of soft grass before rising to shake himself, sending golden dust motes dancing in the light. "He's happy here," Lily said softly, not a question but a statement of profound certainty. "Yes," Emma agreed. "You both are." Margaret placed a gentle hand on her niece's shoulder, a gesture that had once been rare but now came naturally. "Sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead us exactly where we need to be." Lily nodded, her gaze fixed on Thunder, who had lifted his head to look back at them, his eyes bright with recognition and trust. In that moment, surrounded by the gentle beauty of Willow Creek Farm and the people who had become her family, Lily understood a truth that had eluded her since the accident that took her parents. Healing wasn't about returning to who you were before loss changed you. It was about discovering who you could become after it. "Thunder," she called softly, and the magnificent horse responded immediately, trotting toward her with fluid grace, answering to his name and to the unspoken bond between them. Two wounded souls who had found in each other not just recovery, but redemption.